Hi everybody, my name is Natalie Sampson. I'm coming down the road from University of Michigan Dearborn, and we have 3 minutes each, Simone and I, to entice you to come talk to us about engaging youth in environmental health research and as activists. As you might notice, neither of us are youth, so my first message would be to speak to youth, but we're going to just talk about a couple programs in 2 minutes or less that we engage youth in this work. So over at University of Michigan Dearborn, we partner with a bunch of community orgs who've been doing environmental justice work for decades in the Arab American community, local groups at the American Muslim Society and YABA and Access, and Dearborn Public Schools in the city of Dearborn. And one of the things that we are really proud of is these last 2 summers, we've engaged youth for these 2-week programs where they do environmental health research to action. So we get them out learning about air quality 101, we get them out doing community science with handheld monitors, mapping, and then we take them all the way to policy advocacy 101, so they learn how to take and make evidence-based policy advocacy asks from some of the people in this room who do those trainings. And you see them here with Attorney General Dana Nessel, who has listen to them talk about some of the violations at AK Steel, which was a really powerful presentation they gave after. So, you know, these are a trite list of things, superficial things that we've learned in these last 2 summers, but I think if we all get together in a space in the breakout room today, we can talk about what does this really mean to institutionalize and lift up youth in these conversations, and see what they need from us to do this work, what skills, and how we can follow their lead. So you can read these, but I won't read them to you. And Simone's going to talk about similar work in Flint.
Thank you. Thanks for having me as well. I wanted to start off by saying something that adolescents are a key group that we often don't hear from in a lot of these environmental exposure and the crises. And so particularly that was a case in Flint. And so it's important to recognize that the youth can serve as equal partners in the research agenda, and they can make significant changes in their own community. I think Monica just pointed out that the youth, she said, young people were able to see where we were winning. And that's an important piece to add, because a lot of the times the youth also feel disenfranchised, but we don't hear from them. And so one of the things that the Flint group is doing to obtain the voice of adolescents ages 13 to 17, the director for the Center for Research on Ethnicity, Culture, and Health, Dr. Cleo Caldwell, and the Flint Fathers and Sons Community Steering Committee held focus groups with 68 youth in 2016 to get a perspective on how they viewed the Flint water crisis. And then from that, we developed a pilot training program similar to Natalie's around youth participatory action research, where we train the youth on various research skills, both quantitative and qualitative, asset mapping, photo voice, environmental risk assessment, measurements. They went out with their gloves, they did their thing, and they loved the gloves. And we wanted to assess the extent to which they would continue, or to which they perceive health risks from environmental exposures, as someone this morning, oh gosh, I forgot her name. As she pointed out this morning, Yvonne Lewis, she pointed out that Flint has a lot of issues beyond the lead in the water, and so we taught them more than just the lead, right, because that's what they wanted to know. And then we wanted to also see that if educating themselves on ways to reduce their risk within their control, which is a key piece, and then if having active involvement in proposing change in their communities will enhance positive development, increase their interest in science careers, and then increase their civic engagement, which all moves towards better mental health. And so in the pilot, we trained 20 youth in this last summer around the topics we talked about. We focused on, as we mentioned, their psychological development. We had 4 days of training, which youth came out for on a Saturday, which I was really impressed by, 2 8-hour trainings. Then they went with community members who had also been trained on the same curriculum. So the community members facilitated their field work, and then they came back, did their data analysis, decided on the story they wanted to tell. And then, so these are some of the lessons and the quotes from those youth, which I wanted to highlight. I particularly like the one in the middle. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. So that group will be talking in particular about how to mobilize youth and how to prepare youth as the next generation of scientists and activists. You don't have slides, right? Why don't you go ahead and go while we queue up the next set of slides?
Hi. Is this on?
As we move to the upstairs, there will be people up there. Just tell them which room you want, which topic you want, and they'll help you find the room. Angie, which one is yours?
Testing. Good. Hi, I'm Marcus Cheatham. I'm the health officer at the Mid-Michigan District Health Department. A lot of people don't know about the structure of public health in Michigan, so I'm a local health department. I'm not MDHHS. I'm not the state health department. And my jurisdiction includes St. Louis, Michigan, which was the epicenter of the PBB disaster, and that's how I got interested in this topic. We're going to be discussing in my group the role of public health in protecting communities, and I would sort of prefer to call that the problematic role of public health. Public health is supposed to regulate potential polluters. It's supposed to warn the community if something's going wrong. It's supposed to do research and work for new legislation to keep people safe. And as we've been hearing today, a lot of times that does not happen. Public health doesn't anticipate problems. It doesn't respond. It doesn't promulgate new rules. And one of the reasons that that happens is because public health, it's a human organization. People make mistakes, and they're interested in protecting their reputations and wrongly think, like so many people do, if I cover this up, my reputation will be safe, which is reality is the opposite. But more fundamentally, appointed public health leaders report to elected leaders. And as we heard from Bus this morning, elected leaders need constituencies with money to fund campaigns. And so public health leaders, both local, state, and federal, experience being warned, you better not look into that issue, you better not say that in public, or you're going to be in trouble in your career. So what we're going to be doing in my group is talking about ways we can address that problem, ways to hold people accountable, ways that we can tackle problems like the following. Public health represents the racial, social class, and gender biases of our communities because we're from those communities and we tend to replicate the problems that are already there. My talk had an earlier title, which was Public Health and Registries. Registries are the large databases that government should be creating to track people after exposures so that they can study the impacts on communities. And as we've heard today, that's not happening the way it should be either. So if you're interested in the role of public health, that's my group. If you're interested in data and registries, that's my group. I'm going to be in the Kessler room up on the 3rd floor, halfway down on the left. Thank you.
You've heard a lot of talk today about researchers and community working together in partnership. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what that looks like. And this is based on the experience of the Detroit Community Academic Urban Research Center and the Community Action to Promote Healthy Environments, two collaborations that both use community-based participatory research. And it feels very strange to be up here by myself because we always co-present an academic community. I'm the community partner. I'm usually up here with Barbara or Amy, so instead I'm going to channel Barbara and say that this is an approach, it's not a method. That you can use many different methods when you're doing CBPR. You can use qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods, right? Did I get that right, Barbara? So it is a partnership that equitably involves both community and academics in all aspects of the research process. You've heard many examples of that up here today, that community partners as well as academic partners are able to contribute their expertise. Both sides have that, and we have shared responsibility and ownership. And there is also, by including both the expertise of both sides, it enhances the understanding of the phenomena that you're trying to study because you have the information from both sides. And that integrates knowledge, so it's not just research for the sake of research. There's always an intervention involved or policy recommendations or action. Some of the key principles of CBPR is it builds on community strengths and resources. So starts from a non-deficit approach, acknowledging that every community has their own inherent set of knowledge and resources and expertise, and then you build on those things. Promotes a collaborative and equitable partnership, so that includes decision-making, that also includes resources, so that community partners are also reimbursed for their time, because their time is just as valuable as academics' time. Facilitates co-learning and capacity building on both sides, so it acknowledges that academics can learn just as much from community and vice versa, and that we're building each other's capacity as we move along. And then balances that research and action so that it's mutually beneficial to both sides, and we've learned how to do that along the way in years, so including making sure academic partners have time to publish, because we know that's important for them to be able to get tenure and stay in their jobs, and we want them to still be there to work with us, but also making sure that there's action that's benefiting the community along the way. This is a continuum that shows the level of power and control along the various types of research. So like We the People would be all the way over there to the left, right? Your right, should be left, right? And investigator-driven research is all the way on this end. CBPR is like next to the left, my left, and which is different from community-engaged research. So in community-engaged research, the community may have some level of involvement, but does not have the same level of power and control over the decision-making that the research has, right? And then this is just a quick example of some of the accomplishments of translating that research into policy change. This was through the Community Action to Promote Healthy Environments, where we created a public health action plan, and we've been able to use that to influence policies both at the city level and the state level around things like truck routes and truck idling, and making sure that there's buffers, and being able to have public comment about increased emissions. And in particular, we were able to use the research to get $40+ million in community benefits for the Southwest Detroit community, being able to use the research to inform our policymakers around the Gordie Howe Bridge, the second international bridge. So there is light at the end of the tunnel, or rainbow in the clouds, but there are some wins, and particularly when you combine research with community folks, that, as other folks have alluded to, that is very, very powerful, because you have the data to prove that what you're saying is actually true, but you also have the constituents of those people who want to get reelected, so their voice is there as well. So it is a very powerful tool, and I talk about CBPR being a tool for the resistance.
All right, why don't, while we queue up your slides, then you go. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Haverkamp. I'm the director of the Graham Sustainability Institute here at the University of Michigan. We also house the university's water center. Probably a lot of you know the director of our water center, Jennifer Reed. I am going to be facilitating the discussion breakout this afternoon on policy change. For those of us who had the privilege last night of seeing that great film, we also heard inspiring speeches from some of our remarks from some of our Michigan congressional delegation. And Representative Dan Kildee quoted President Abraham Lincoln, who said, "In this age, in this country, public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Against it, nothing can succeed." So with the enthusiasm, the people offline in overflow rooms, I think we have a lot of enthusiasm here, but it's also the case that public sentiment is not by itself enough to ensure good policy outcomes. Decision makers, to make good decisions, also need access to good science, and they need to understand the perspectives and circumstances of the people that they're regulating. So this breakout session would be a chance to take stock on what are the policies that we need to address the PFAS crisis, and how to ensure that the process brings along the key stakeholders and the best available science. So we've heard, even from some of the speakers today, some of the policy recommendations that are out there. I'll just mention a few that we could talk about. Something this complex requires multiple responses at the local, the state, the federal, and even the international level. Some that I have heard from groups, and I'm sure there are more, is Michigan should establish strict drinking water standards to protect human health. Michigan and others should regulate PFAS chemicals as a class of compounds, not one at a time in that whack-a-mole way. That the Department of Defense should phase out PFAS in firefighting, foam, and other applications. We've heard some more profound ideas from Linda this morning that we should limit PFAS to just essential uses. There needs to be proof of just the essential use before it would be available to be deployed. There are a lot more possible amendments or regulations under the Clean Water Act, the Superfund law. We heard a recommendation to reinstate the tax so that there would be funding to actually implement these changes, to extend Superfund to include this category of chemicals. Even recommendations I've heard that the U.S.-Canada Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement could be brought to bear on this problem. Another one is to flip the presumption. Why is it that we regulate under FDA so that you have to prove that something is safe, whereas with chemicals, you get to use them until somebody comes and gets over the hurdle of proving that they're actually a problem? So those are some of the questions. Other questions we can talk about in this breakout. Okay, how do we prioritize all these policy changes that have been identified? What ideas are missing from these lists? What are the obstacles to their implementation? And in part, what kind of proposals are needed to bring in the data collection that will make sure that the decisions and the policies are based on good science? What are the constituencies and advocates that ought to be brought along? What are the tactics and strategies from other movements like civil rights that we could bring to bear here? So who should come to this breakout session? I think all of you. Sorry.
The youth are going to do some of that.
Well, I think there's a lot of overlap between this and the other groups, but my group too will be in the Kessler room, and I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks.
Thank you. And Angie just reminded me the breakout rooms are in your program, so you can look in your program and see where your breakout room is going to be. So.
Hi, you guys heard from me already. I'm Courtney Carignan at MSU. I'm going to keep this brief, so I'm going to be facilitating a workshop on building national networks, which I feel kind of unqualified to lead. I have some experience with national networks for PFAS, both on the scientific side and on the community side. So I can share those experiences at this workshop, but I'm hoping that some people with expertise and ideas will come and we can brainstorm, what national networks exist, what are gaps, where do you see, networks are needed, and how can we accomplish those goals. So we'll be in the Henderson room, and I look forward to seeing you.